I'd just like to welcome everybody to the public meeting of the London TravelWatch Board and to members of the public who might be looking in at us. So we've got a good agenda. We've got a guest at 12 o'clock who will be able to talk to us about personal security on London Underground network, and so that will be a good topic of conversation. Before that, we've got a couple of items to cover, and then some standing items after that. But so we'll start the meeting. Just to start formally with apologies. We have apologies from Karen and Priya and Laura, unfortunately for a mixture of illness and travel elements. So 3 people are not able to join the board today. Just to bring people up to date, Chair's activities, not a huge amount to tell you today that you haven't heard before, but just to let you know that Emma and I have had discussion with Helen Ewan, who's the new director of the Secretariat at the London Assembly. So she started at the end of last year. It's been a good discussion between us and the London Assembly Transport Committee. I hope everyone can hear me, because I'm told my internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me? People can hear. Okay. So we're trying to fix up a meeting with the Transport Committee. It's not easy because of diaries, but Helen and other people in her team are trying to fix that up. And through Caroline Pigeon, who's the chair of the Transport Committee. So I hope we can do that. They're now almost into the new building at the Crystal in East London. So it'll be an opportunity for us to get together, but it's always easier said than done to get a diary date together. So that's really the only thing I wanted to mention to people, unless anyone's got any particular questions for me. Okay, good. So can we just move on formally to approve, I hope, a change to the collaboration agreement, which is the agreement between Transport Focus and London TravelWatch. As board members know, there's been previous discussion about Anthony Smith, who is joint chief executive of the 2 organisations. Decision was taken, or a proposal was put forward, that he would stand down and Emma would take over as Chief Executive Officer of London TravelWatch and take on responsibilities for, among other things, accounting officer responsibility. But we do need to just formally approve that change. So that's why this has come to today's meeting. It's the first opportunity we've had to formally approve the change. So I just wanted to make sure that the board is comfortable with that change. So unless anybody dissents, I'll assume approval. So thank you for that, and welcome to Emma as formally as CEO of London TravelWatch. So there's a lot to do, and I know Emma will do a good job in leading us through a very active time in transport over the next couple of years. So perhaps this is an opportunity for Emma to present her first report formally as CEO. So Emma, do you want to take us through the paper? I know, unfortunately, for people who are watching, Emma's been struggling with quite a nasty cough, and so struggling with her voice a little bit. So I won't put you under too much pressure to talk for too long, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I won't cover every aspect in my report. I'll just cover some of the kind of the initial items. So on the bus, I guess since I wrote this report, TfL have now released their bus action plan, which was really good to see, and we commented on that on Friday. I think the key measure in their bus action plan that we're really happy to see is that they plan to make bus journeys 10% faster than they were baseline of 2015, and it's something that we've been talking to them about for about 2 years, so it's quite a big milestone there, subject to funding though, of course. I think everything in the bus action plan is subject to being able to get the funding to be able to do this. And so, as you know, we think we're very happy with what Transport for London are doing at the moment. Our focus has been moving on to the boroughs a bit more recently, and we've sent direct messages on Twitter to councillors who are looking for election in the May the 5th elections. And we've also helped the Clean Cities campaign to formulate a bus ask in the lobbying that they're doing for council candidates. But, you know, although some money, £50 million, has been allocated for borough schemes in the latest TfL deal, which lasts until the end of June, there's still significant uncertainty over how bus priority measures and other kind of active travel measures will be funded in the longer term. So we need to kind of watch that space on that one. So yeah, we're making some progress on that one. On personal security, following publication of our report in February, we've had good meetings with the British Transport Police, with TfL, with South Eastern Trains, to name just a few of the people we've spoken to. And I think our kind of big success so far has been around the idea of giving advice to bystanders about what they can do if they witness a crime on the transport network. And our bus video seems to have provided encouragement for both British Transport Police and TfL to increase and boost their work in this area. So that's really, really pleased to see that. And it's great that we've got Siwan Hayward from TfL coming to speak to us later about what they're doing, what their plans are in this area. On rail, I was really pleased for us to be able to put in a kind of detailed response to the GBR WISP consultation. And we've also submitted a response to a consultation on changes to ticket office closure consultations that we know is on the horizon, because we've seen that in the news in the last day or two. So that's obviously something that, you know, we mentioned in our business plan, that we knew that was coming. We still don't know the exact timing of it, but we know that it's coming probably quite soon. And certainly, according to a newspaper report today, the RMT are suggesting that pretty much they're saying that they think every ticket office in the country is under threat. So this could be a massive change. And we've been making the point yesterday that it's it's an issue for personal safety, especially for women. It's an issue for disabled people being able to access the rail network properly. And so, yeah, we'll be making those arguments as we go forward. But obviously, the backdrop is that huge cuts being made to the railways, which have got to be made somewhere. And in terms of our rail research that we're doing, that is almost complete, and we'll release a summary of that when we've finally got everything together. And I think on what I'll mention our digital community, this is Richard's objective, to grow and diversify our digital community. And just to mention that this is the objective where we're struggling. It's only the beginning of the period for this objective, but we're still struggling. We've tried 3 times to recruit new people to the digital community, haven't been hugely successful. And our analysis is that the bar is just too high in terms of getting people who don't really know our work to give us their email addresses. And so we're kind of looking at ways that we can meet the spirit of the objective, maybe, and not that objective itself, which is to making sure that we are incorporating the views and insights of the broadest range of people who use transport in London and into London as possible. So we're going to be looking at new ways to do this. And the team had an interesting session with Priya Kalar, our board member, about this last week, to explore some ideas that she was suggesting. And then finally, I'll just say a quick word about diversity and inclusion. We've now got appointed Richard, who's going to be our kind of champion on mental health and well-being, and Susan, who's going to be champion on the race equality aspect of our diversity and inclusion strategy. So they're formulating what their kind of initial steps are to kind of take these areas forward. So I think I'm very happy to take questions on some of the other areas that I mentioned in my report, but I'm going to leave my talking at that for now.
Okay, thank you, Emma. And so I'm conscious that every question means more strain on your voice for an answer, but perhaps I could just come in on this issue of the ticket office closures, which, as you say, has been it's been covered quite widespread style in the newspapers. It's clearly coming. It's understood that there's a need for control of the finances on railways, and it's going to be a challenge as to which way to go. If we're able to put across the message that this is more than just the method of how tickets are sold or how people buy tickets, I think that's going to be important, and you've already touched on this. It's about personal security and accessibility, getting information. I think that's where the strongest arguments are. Clearly, the way that people buy tickets has changed enormously for most people over the last 5 years, and it's understandable. If you looked at it purely in those terms, you would argue, is there a need for ticket offices? It's much wider than that, and I think that's going to be important when the consultation comes through, that we're getting those messages across. And that was, I know board members did see our submission in terms of the wider issues of rail reform, and I think we made very clear that there were wider issues than purely the ticket offices themselves, ticket sales themselves. It's about how the customer service is offered to passengers. But do people have particular thoughts, first of all about ticket offices, but more generally on Emma's report? No? Okay. So I think we've got just in terms of the ticket offices, we haven't heard, I don't think, Emma, of any timing of the consultation. I don't think, is that's
no, we don't. We still don't know the timing. So this news over the weekend was the first kind of time this has been made public, I guess, that it's happening, that proposals are going to be brought forward. And I think we're going to have to make some kind of judgment really about what level of resourcing we can put into responding to consultations, because if there are many consultations, because if every single ticket office has to have its own consultation process, then it's going to become very difficult for us to have our say on all of them. Yeah. But obviously, we have a statutory responsibility to conduct the consultation on each and every change to a ticket office. So we're standing by to have to do a lot of work on that aspect, and thinking about having to get temporary staff in to deal with that, and whether there might be some funding available from the Department for Transport, for example, to kind of help us to do that, because it could be a really overwhelming job for the organisation, because we're used to dealing with maybe one consultation at a time, not potentially hundreds.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be quite a big issue. I know Transport Focus have just done a consultation on the ticket office closures in Scotland, and that was a massive piece of work, and I think that was for 200 stations, I think, across Scotland, affected in one way or another. And of course we could have many more than that, so we do need to look at the resourcing of this if necessary, but that's something we can come back to, I think. Alan.
So I remember when we did the consultation on the London Overground ticket office changes, there was a lot of commonality between the different offices. I wonder whether there's an opportunity for us to put together it's going to be very similar issues. Could we have an almost standardized response that we could then feed into it the locality specific issues? Is that a way to ease the effort for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we would have to do for sure. And it'd be interesting, Alan, I don't know if you know of any you know, accessibility campaigners that you know are looking at working on this issue or not as well. I mean, it's something that I've kind of highlighted to people over the last few months, but I've maybe being a resourcing issue, I'm not kind of clear that anybody else apart from us is going to be doing anything on it.
I think there are individuals or local groups that are working on individual stations. I don't think there is a concerted effort about the whole issue. I'm sure I can hook you up with, as I say, those local groups, but I think the bigger picture is going to fall to us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that will be the case, and I mean, you're right, Alan. To have some sort of generic comments, undoubtedly we will have those, and that will be done. Unfortunately, the way the nature of these consultations, it's very specific to the station, and of course people respond very specifically on their needs and the purpose of that particular ticket office. So it ends up being very sort of granular in terms of the work that needs to be done. So it's very resource intensive, and I think we'll need to make allowances for that, and if necessary bring in extra resource. But we'll have a discussion on that, depending on what the timings of this work is going to be. It's probably going to be over an extended period, but of course the risk is that everybody tries to do brings forward their plans at the same time. But I'm hoping it's going to be extended. But even so, that's probably going to mean the best part of sort of 9 months' work, and that's going to be quite a hit on resource. Okay, is everybody comfortable with the CEO's report? But thanks, Emma, for that, and particularly thanks, I think, for all the work that's done around personal security and the bus campaign. I think has been phenomenal, and I think we've certainly had a lot of pick up from that. I think it's raised our profile, and more importantly raised our credibility, I think, with stakeholders and a lot of partners. So there's been some really good work, so thanks to everybody who's been involved with those pieces of work. Okay, I'm conscious of we've got a bit of spare time before our guest comes at 12 o'clock. So I have asked Susan if she's been willing to change timing slightly to do the casework report before Siwan joins us. So Susan, if you're comfortable and if the board's happy with that, we'll go on to casework now.
Okay, yes, no problem at all. Thank you, Arthur. Okay, so the reports obviously you've seen, so I'm not going to go through it line by line, but a couple of things I'd like to draw your attention to is the increase in appeals received compared to the same period last year. Obviously this isn't the entire quarter because it doesn't finish until the end of March, and when we'll be able to see where we are. But it makes sense as people start returning to the network. There will be more people complaining as there was before, and also people have higher expectations. People who've travelled throughout the pandemic have got used to travel on trains that maybe not empty but have more room, and have forgotten the nightmare of overcrowding, and also that service levels aren't back up to what they were before, and people's just expectations seem to have changed over the course of the last couple of years. So where none of this is really surprising, the sudden increase was quite surprising. No, I don't think there's anything else that I actually do need to draw your attention to, but I will have to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Any particular questions for Susan on her report? Susan.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks for the update, Susan. That's really useful. I suppose and I know this is a difficult one to predict, but I suppose as things do return a bit more back to normal, with people returning back to offices since COVID, are you anticipating that these levels will change? And if so, have you got the appropriate plans in place to cater for that?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I don't know. I couldn't tell you at the moment. We're in a time when everything that we knew before, everything we could predict before, has changed. So a new variant would throw everything out again. New rules in France would change things for Eurostar, which would change our contact. It would also change people travelling who are travelling to King's Cross. If more people choose then to work from home, there'll be less people travelling. What I have noticed is there is more people using trains for leisure, and leisure passengers historically will complain more. They have a much higher expectation than a commuter, although that has changed also now as well. Prior to COVID, the commuters were very forgiving, but that's not the case anymore. We've had people also complaining that the cost of their season ticket, the service that they would like to see, doesn't reflect that, because there isn't as many trains running at the moment as there were prior to COVID. And then we might see more of an uplift as TfL go into this kind of managed decline, and there's less bus services. So we may see an uplift there. But when the ULEZ zone came out to the North and South Circular last November, I expected to see quite an uplift in our cases, and I was right. We did see an uplift in our cases, but not on the subjects I thought it was going to be. So it's just, at the moment, it's a really, really difficult one to call. What is kind of nice, though, is we are seeing complaints that we used to see prior to COVID. I never thought I'd be happy to see them again, but it is quite a relief to see that sort of very general, I'm not happy with. It just seems that we're now pulling out of COVID, but judging by the news today, we could be pushed back at any moment. So I just did want to say also, in the last board meeting, Susan mentioned what we could put on our website about casework, and Susan and I had an interesting conversation last week, and I think we've come to the conclusion what we may put on our website is the types of complaints that we're receiving. That might be quite interesting, rather than any outcomes or something like that. So yeah, that would be definitely something I'd be looking to add to the casework side of the London TravelWatch website over the next 6 months.
Thank you. And just a quick supplementary question. I've noticed that there's quite a lot of cases that come in around the Eurostar, which is obviously outside of remit, and I just wondered what opportunity there was to sort of proactively redirect those into the right place, so preventing them to come to your team at all. I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Eurostar is in our remit. Does it say that it's not?
Oh, it just says most were out of our remit on your report. 37
Yes.
cases were from Eurostar passengers, most were out of our remit.
Yeah, so with cases like where they're talking about border force, that would be out of our remit. We've had a lot of complaints about border force because people have been stopped travelling because of COVID, different measures in different countries. So yeah, we will tell people that it's the government that they have to go to, but they see Eurostar as the brand and think that they're the ones who should be dealing with it. But unfortunately, the border force, UK border force, supersedes anything that Eurostar say, which you'd hope they would do. And it's the same at the other end. So Eurostar would have complaints about not being able to travel easily into the UK because of the respective countries that stop them travelling.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I just ask Susan, it's not in your report, but it's just sort of a linked element, the work of the the Railway Ombudsman. Are there any changes happening there? And I know a lot of reform work is being discussed, which is probably longer term. Is there any change in the immediate future around the Ombudsman and our relationship with the Ombudsman?
Yes, there is. Thank you, Arthur. There is. I found out at the end of last week that Transport for London, TfL Rail, which is Crossrail, and TfL Overground will move to some appeals can go to the Rail Ombudsman from the 1st of April. Now, the reason they can go is because these train lines, because they are train lines, used to have the licence conditions. There used to be Silverlink would be one of them. And for TfL Crossrail, where the underground would be very kind of easy to say that that would come under London TravelWatch, the either side of it is licensed. It's the rail license, so that's why it's gone to the Rail Ombudsman from that date. I've got a meeting with the Rail Ombudsman this afternoon to make sure that what we're signposting people towards is correct, and what I think that they will do and we should be doing is correct. I'm fairly confident. I mean, we went through this before when the rail went to the Rail Ombudsman. It was a lot less of a problem than we'd originally thought. The challenge is at TfL's end rather than ours to make sure that they signpost correctly. And the general rule of thumb, unless it's revenue protection and it's on a rail, it goes to the Rail Ombudsman. And then if they think it's out of scope, they send it to us. The problem with it, though, is passengers are going to wait longer because at the moment, passengers can come to us within 20 working days or before if they haven't had a response or they're not happy with the response from Transport for London. Now they're going to have to wait 40 working days, or unless TfL deadlock them earlier, which means they'll get a letter to say you're now can go to the Rail Ombudsman. And whereas we're working with the Rail Ombudsman to try to reduce this down to 20 working days, it's still a disadvantage for passengers. And there are some very good advantages, particularly around accessibility for complaints to go to the Rail Ombudsman. But it could be challenging, and that we could have real difficulties as that happens. So I will do what I can to support TfL and their contact centre to make sure that this is as smooth as possible for passengers who are using, who want to continue their complaint pathway.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Well, thanks for picking that up. And yeah, what we're trying to do is avoid any sort of confusion for passengers or two different sets of deadlines or whatever. Just that's just going to leave people muddled, isn't it? So I'm sure you're on the case for that one, Susan.
Thank you, Arthur.
Okay. Susan, is your hand up from earlier, or is a new query? Yeah.
It's not. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Okay. Right. So does anyone have any other queries for Susan? No. Okay. Well, thanks very much for all the work that's being done. And I know predicting the future is it's absolutely impossible at the moment. But as far as anyone can, I'm sure, Susan, you'll give it a good go. So thanks for your work and to the team. Right, I'm pleased to see that we have our guest, Siwan Hayward. Hello, Siwan.
Hi there. Can I just do a tech check that you can both see me and hear me?
I can hear you well. I can,
because we are not Zoom users in TfL.
Oh right, your Teams, are you?
See me? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're Teams users. So I'm on my son's laptop. So which I think is why when I first joined, it said my name was Tom. I'm not Tom. So yeah. So I'm trying to. I'm multi-tech.
Okay. Well, it's really good to see you, and we can certainly hear you loud and clear. We're just losing the top of your head, but don't worry about that.
Okay.
But we've almost got you now. That's perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's gonna be okay. I'll try and stay in this position, but
all right.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, do my very best. I'm not even sure where the camera is. Okay. Anyways, look. So look, let me kick off if you're happy. And I'd like to start.
Siwan, I'll just introduce you, if you don't mind, because we may have members of the public maybe watching us. So it's just to make clear who you are, and I'll introduce you. So we have Siwan Hayward, who's director of quite a lengthy title you have, Siwan. I noticed Director of Compliance, Policing, Operations and Security at Transport for London. But we've worked with Siwan in recent times following publication of by London TravelWatch of a very comprehensive report and some research into personal security on public transport. And I think it's fair to say Siwan and Emma and others have had a good sort of starting conversation as to how we can develop security. It's never an easy thing, but it's absolutely crucial to the running of public transport, and we are aware of concerns that members of the public have. So it'd be great to hear from you, Siwan, as to how you're addressing these issues, and take it as read that we're very supportive of the work that you're doing, and all we'll ever ask is, can we do more, which is always the challenge, I know. But I think the work that we've done gives an opportunity to really have a very open and sort of positive discussion about what can be achieved, and how can we put more effort, all of us, into improving security for passengers. So I won't hold things up anymore. The stage is yours, Siwan. I'll let you talk to us and present to us as you wish, and then we'll have a bit of time for questions and answers, if that's okay.
So Arthur, can I thank you and the members of the London TravelWatch Board for such a warm and generous welcome. I am absolutely delighted to be here, and have been so pleased and really welcome the work that Emma and the team have done in shining a spotlight on personal security. Because for me personally, and for the wider Transport for London, this is such a significant issue, and particularly an issue now as we emerge from the pandemic and we think about public transport and the kind of public transport that we want to see delivered in the capital, and for everyone to feel welcome and safe. And as we move from such a focus on safety and people's health and well-being into those much more wider concerns people have about personal security. So what I plan to do is just talk for I don't know, like 10, 20 minutes or so, just to describe a bit about the work that me and my team lead in Transport for London, some of the work that we have underway, and some of the work that we have planned, and then really open it up as an opportunity to hear from all of you for questions and comments, and as a result see how, what further we can do together to take this issue forward. And I suppose I want to start today as well, and you may not be aware of this, but we got the news this morning that a 16-year-old boy who was stabbed on a Route 173 bus in Chadwell Heath yesterday, 5 to 4 in the afternoon after school. He was in an altercation with an 18-year-old boy at a bus stop. They both got on the bus. He was stabbed in the arm, and he died of his injuries this morning. And it is a very, very rare instance for us to have someone who is murdered on a bus. But obviously, clearly at this moment in time, as always, our thoughts are very much with his family and his wider friends, and with the bus driver and the wider community. And it just does, really highlight the importance both of what we do, but what we need to keep doing as well, and what we need to keep doing differently. And I'll come back to the topic of the focus that we put on trying to keep knives off our network and trying to make our network safe and welcoming for all young people. But actually, serious youth violence as an issue in the capital is an issue which also affects the transport network, and one which we are very alert and alive to. So, with that news very much kind of at the forefront of our mind, I do want to start by sort of recognising that actually public transport is so important to London, and for TfL having a safe and secure, reliable public transport network, that's our purpose, and that's what we exist to do. And on the security side, and you're absolutely right in your report to highlight that when we talk about security, it's distinct from safety. It is not about the kind of internal systems that we have in place to manage risk that rise from hazards or oversights or accidents. It is about actually protecting our customers, our colleagues, our infrastructure and our operation from those who have hostile intentions, from those who are externally seeking to cause harm or cause hurt, and whether that's harm or hurt to our customers, to our colleagues, but also, you know, more broadly to our wider, you know, our reputation, our finances, our wider organisation. So there is a very distinct recognition about what personal security and security means. And to date, TfL has been phenomenally successful in ensuring that public transport in London is a low crime environment. So, and that very much is our ambition. It's one of the, you know, key ambitions for us as an organisation, is that we run a public transport network that is safe, but more importantly, one that feels safe as well. So pre-pandemic, going back to 2019, of the 11 million journeys or so that were made on public transport in the capital, the rate of crime, so crime has been reported to our policing partners, to us at TfL, that we saw around 9 crimes reported for every million passenger journeys made. That makes London one of the safest public transport networks in the world, on the basis of what's reported to the police. And we know there are significant flaws and shortcomings with that, within those figures, and I will return to that. But we put a significant amount of investment in our planning, in our design, in our partnership with policing, in how we operate our transport network, the training and support that we give to our staff, and the information and marketing and education and engagement that we give to all customers, to really try to create a network which feels safe. But we absolutely recognise that for women and girls, and for many other marginalised groups, and groups that are seldom heard, and groups which, in fact, London TravelWatch does such a fantastic job at amplifying their voices, you know, that it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel welcoming. At times of day, in particular places, public transport doesn't feel safe. And actually, the fact that we're very proud of, you know, having such low levels of crime reporting could just as well reflect the fact that we're seeing people choosing not to travel. And actually people who are therefore not experiencing all that London has to offer because of fear of using public transport. And increasingly within TfL, we are really trying to think about the whole journey experience. Because of course, we run and manage a public transport network and can control that network to the best of our abilities. But actually, when we think about safety and security, we need to think about the whole journey. And every journey starts with walking. And we increasingly need to think about personal security people when they're cycling, when they're walking, at all times of day, of night, and across all environments in the capital. So that does remain very much in our thinking. And that's why, you know, the insights that London TravelWatch have given us are really valuable. They give us a real, you know, additional focus for where we should be putting our efforts, where we should be putting what funding we have. And yeah, really, really welcome. I'd really like to come back at the end of this to talk with you further about what more we can do together. So just a little bit about me and my directorate. So we are a directorate within TfL Operations, in the recently created TfL Operations. But we have a pan-TfL remit, and we take the strategic lead for security. And we work with every single one of the operational businesses, roads, buses, London Underground, Elizabeth Line, all the rail responsive services networks, to deliver against a shared set of priorities and outcomes in terms of ensuring that everyone is safe and feels safe when they travel. As a directorate, we oversee a significant investment that TfL makes in policing. We invest around £150 million in policing, and we have sought to safeguard that level of investment, even as we go through the financial challenges that we're currently facing. But we also have our own operational capability. Oh, my screen's just gone. Have you got my...
Still got
you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's still wrong from my end. Let me just...
Okay.
Okay, something's gone. Yeah, so but we also have capability that deals with We have crime reduction specialists who advise on design and the prevention of crime and antisocial behaviour. We have a really strong analytical team to ensure that the decisions that we make are data driven from the insight that we get from our customers, from the insight that we get from our stakeholders, as well as all the reporting that we get through social media, through our customer contact centres, through the policing. And we have our own investigations, appeals and prosecutions functions, so that we can properly investigate and prosecute when there are breaches made of TfL's bylaws and the rules that we have in place that really create a safe network. So those are all the bylaws that cover things like, you know, the need to pay a right fare and not take an e-scooter on a underground train or any of our rail operators, and also the bylaws, you know, the laws that we had in place to ensure the wearing of face coverings. So we're quite a substantial directorate of around 800 people or so, everyone working to share a set of values and common purpose around the security of all our customers and our colleagues. And we are very grounded in theories around broken windows, around the importance of visibility in neighbourhood policing, of problem solving and of safeguarding. And we really do as a directorate prioritise the protection of the most vulnerable people, because we recognise that crime and antisocial behaviour discriminates. It has a disproportionate impact on marginalised communities, and those people are already facing disadvantage, discrimination in their lives. So we have a really strong focus, and as you well know, currently on violence against women and girls, on hate crime, on serious youth violence and keeping knives up our network, on safeguarding children and adults who are at risk, including rough sleepers and those with mental health problems, and a really strong emphasis on trying to prevent work-related violence. We've made a commitment to all our staff across TfL that we're seeking to eradicate the risk of them facing any forms of aggression, abuse or violence while they're at work. And in addition to those areas of focus, obviously we maintain a really strong security posture against those national security threats, which include the threat of terrorism and the threat that's emerging from hostile states. And obviously that's very current and live at this point in time. And as I was describing this, we have these really strong foundations in place. So we have a theoretical framework, we have a significant level of investment, and we have a legal obligation as an organisation. It's one that we volunteer to take on, and it's an obligation that applies to local authorities and to other partners. But we volunteered to take on, is now committed to the legislation, that we are required under Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act to give due consideration to the prevention of crime and antisocial behaviour in all the decisions that TfL makes. So that means that we are in that decision making, we are very much giving advice and guidance to colleagues who are designing new stations, who are changing the road network, to really put in place security considerations. And we would welcome your constructive criticism about where you think we maybe should fall in short on prevention of crime and antisocial behaviour considerations in the decisions that we make. So I just want to leave that with you. So as I said, we've invested around £150 million or so in additional policing. And what that policing delivers is around 2,500 police officers and police community support officers. They work across the whole of the transport network, with British Transport Police policing the rail and underground network. And we have a partnership with the Metropolitan Police, which is dedicated to working with us on the surface transport network, called the Roads and Transport Policing Command. And that's commanded around 1,800 officers. And they work across road safety, so preventing road danger through tackling speeding and other forms of antisocial driving, right through to policing the bus network and support across bus stations, the bus network, and then policing taxi and private hire. And within our policing approach, we have a really strong emphasis on visible uniform policing presence, neighbourhood policing providing reassurance, deterring crime and antisocial behaviour, but also we fund a significant level of enhanced investigative capability. So that means that when and if hate crimes or other priority crimes occur in the transport network, we have funded additional investigative capability. So those crimes are prioritised by our policing partners, and we are seeking to bring offenders to justice. And so you will get a different response than if you reported a crime on a crime that occurred in London compared to a crime that occurred in the transport network. You should get a far better level of investigative support. Obviously, in addition to that, the transport network we are seeking to make it feel like a very controlled and well-managed space. So we have CCTV, our staff increasingly aware of body-worn cameras. That's both to protect themselves, but also prevent and deter crime and social behaviour. We have a lot of messaging across our network on crime prevention and on safety and on the importance of reporting. We have help points, we have passenger alarms. We try to really create an environment that does feel safe and gives people reassurance that there is support in place. And in addition to that, and just so you're aware, and this is something I'm really happy to come and talk to you about another time, is that we do a huge amount of work in collaboration with our policing partners about how we use the data that TfL collects, both the data from Oyster and from CPC, so how people, the digital footprint that people leave as they use our network, as well as our CCTV networks. We use that data in supporting police investigations and in the prevention of crime and social behaviour, and that's in supporting all police investigations across the capital. Because very much, as you will be aware, that crime on London's public transport network broadly reflects what's happening across the capital, and that's why that partnership with Met and the wider partnership at a mayoral level with MOPAC is so important. So I thought I'd just give you some of the sort of kind of stats so you can see what we currently know in terms of what's reported. So going back to in 2021, so from April to January of this year, so 21 to 22, we've had around 23,000 offences reported across London's public transport network. That's about 33% lower than during the years of the pandemic, the 1920. So you'll spot from that our passenger volumes dropped significantly during the pandemic. The rate of crime, the volume of crime did not drop in the same way during the course of the pandemic. So we still saw criminality, in particular types of criminality, on our network. Maybe that's not surprising, people who are rule breakers and who are, and criminality is still very much kind of affecting our network, even though overall passenger volumes is down. What we did see is that across many years, theft in the form of pickpocketing is by far the most common crime that occurs in public transport in London. And that did fall significantly during the pandemic, and it remains much lower. Of crime across public transport, around half the crime occurs in the bus network and the rest in the remaining rail and underground modes. And that's not surprising. Obviously, buses still carry a far greater volume of passengers, almost double the volume of passengers that travel on any of our other networks. Around 1 in 5 crimes in the bus network, the victim is under the age of 16. So we do have this particular focus and concern, and do a huge amount of work with schools through the London Transport Museum in terms of how do we better protect young people so they experience the thrill of travelling and everything that London has to offer, but experience it in a way in which they are safe and they are kept safe. And again, it's something that I think potentially it'd be really good for London TravelWatch to return to look at the work that through the museum goes on in schools. But also I'm really interested in your views about what more we can do in that area, both in terms of young people as travellers, young people as potential as victims of crime, and how we protect young people from being victims of crime, being confident travellers and the travellers of the future. But also we do see a disproportionate number of suspects of particular violence offences being in the in the 16 to 25 age group as well. So there's a real age disproportionality in terms of what's happening across our public transport. About 35% of crime overall that's reported are violence and public order offences. The vast majority of those are public order offences. So those are offences which don't result in someone being injured. And pre-pandemic, this was a growing issue, particularly on rail and underground networks, where we'd see at the busiest times when the network was very crowded, we'd see huge spikes in aggression, in people pushing and shoving, and that being reported to us as a crime. That obviously is changing now because the patterns of travel, but that was a growing issue for us pre-pandemic, and one which was proven incredibly challenging to address because what we were seeing was people's frustrations spilling out into really ugly behaviour, and these are people who've got, you know, no previous criminal record, no history of offending, but those frustrations were showing themselves as really ugly behaviour. In terms of sexual offences, and that absolutely is a kind of key focus for us. Of our current reported crimes, only about 5% are sexual offences, and the vast majority of those are sexual assault, which is non-consensual touching. About 2%, and of those sexual offences, then further kind of to 20-25% of them are exposure. So it's the offences which are called outrage in public decency and exposure offences, and we particularly see exposure offences on the bus network, with a lot of victims being schoolgirls under the age of 16 travelling at school travel times. So schoolgirls in uniform with men on the buses expose themselves, and that's a very particular seam of concern that we've put quite a lot of effort into tackling. And then overall, about 8% of reported offences on our transport network are flagged as hate crimes. And again, most of these are public order offences. So some have been aggressive, some have been abusive. And of hate crimes, racist hate crimes are about 80% of that overall, 16%, with disability hate crime as low as 2%, and that does trouble us. We know from our engagement work with disability stakeholder groups that the experience is far more common and far more widespread, but that's not coming through on our reporting figures. And obviously we do know that for both hate crimes and for sexual offences and sexual harassment, that these are crime types that are significantly underreported. I thought I would just talk a bit more about sexual offences and sexual harassment, and clearly that was a theme that was picked up, rightly so, within your personal security report. And both sexual offences and hate crimes are, you know, they are crimes and behaviours which are prevalent and widespread across society, and they are reflective of social norms that collectively we have a responsibility to challenge, but we have a distinct responsibility, obviously, as Transport for London, and we are focused on eradicating both hate crime and sexual harassment from our networks, whilst recognising that our networks do reflect much wider societal and cultural issues. There are distinctions that I want to draw out. So we started working on sexual offences and really putting focused effort on tackling sexual offences, sort of going back to about 2015, and that was very much informed by stakeholder groups, but also by our own research. And we do regular surveys of Londoners about their experience of transport and travelling in the capital, and that research confirmed for us, I think, what you all know, which is that 1 in 7 women had experienced some form of unwanted sexual behaviour on one of London's public transport modes over the previous 12 months. But of those women, fewer than 10% went on to report it to the police or to transport staff. So we know there's a massive underreporting within sexual offences. And there is a distinct nature to sexual offences that happen on the public transport network, which is that and particularly this was a real focus for us going back in 2015 when we launched what was called Project Guardian and ran a number of communications campaigns with a range of partners, called the Report It, Stop It campaign, which we very much spearheaded with British Transport Police and with our partners in the Met. But we know that predatory sex offenders will target public transport, and they will target public transport because it's a crowded space, and for those predators, it is a target-rich environment. So we're talking about sexual predators who have a specific predilection for a particular type of woman or girl, and they will target public transport because it's an environment where those women can be found. We know that they will use the movement of the vehicle and the crowding of the vehicle as an opportunity to covertly commit sexual offences in a way which then they can, you know, it can be dismissed or excused. So our real focus, and we put huge effort into this group of sexual predators back in 15, 16, 17 and 18. So a very, very distinct group of sexual predators targeting public transport, using the movement of crowded vehicles as an excuse to be able to grope, to be able to touch, be able to rub themselves up against other passengers. And for many, for many victims of sexual offences, they wouldn't even be aware it was happening to them until they got off the tube and saw there was semen all down their skirt. So a really horrific type of crime. And we, with our partners in the British Transport and Metropolitan Police, put huge effort into developing plainclothes capability. And why we put such an effort into encouraging reporting, and still do, is because we know that that behaviour is repeated escalating behaviour. And the targeting means that they'll target particular lines, particular locations, particular times of day. But actually, it meant that for plainclothes and skilled specialist investigative officers and detectives, we were able to actually put our police officers on the bus network, on the tube network, who could spot these individuals and their behaviour, who would spot the behaviour of a predator who would stand on a platform as 3 or 4 trains would leave, and they would only get onto a specific train because their target was on that train. So we were incredibly successful in securing the arrest and conviction of a significant number of sexual predators who were targeting our network. As we move on from that, I mean, that is still an issue. That's still a significant problem within across public transport. But we are really trying to really broaden this issue now, because actually that form of sexual predation is part of a much wider patterns of behaviour which are endemic in our society, and which allow violence against women and girls to occur. And that does start with the look and the words and what's said. And it's from that behaviour and that behaviour becoming so normalised that actually the actions of sexual predators who are persistent in their offending, is allowed to happen, allowed to continue. So our focus much now is on a much broader sexual harassment. So it's really welcome to see how that's picked up and really highlighted in the report.
Sure.
Just to pause there, yeah.
Just a bit conscious of time, and I know that we've got a lot of questions. You've got a lot to say, and it's fascinating with the knowledge you've got. So I don't want to lose the chance for people to ask questions. So if you're able to give I'll try and bring this here. As you can see, I can talk about this for some time. Yeah. So just to make this distinction, so hate crime also is a real cause of concern in our network, but it is quite distinct. So people don't target the transport network to commit hate crime the same way that we see with sexual offences, but it does happen as a result of, it's normally another trigger. So someone gets frustrated because their bus is late, or someone, and they will abuse our staff. So we see hate crime occurring on our network. But it's not a targeting of transport in the same way. But it mirrors, and it's a spillover what's happening in wider society. But what we do see is peaks of hate crime happening on the network as well. So we saw peaks after Brexit, we saw peaks during COVID. So whatever's happening more broadly, we'll see that real peak within public transport, because it's an environment where people come together, people from all walks of life come together, and that's why we love London's public transport. So just to summarise, so some things that we're doing, particularly in our efforts to tackle hate crime and to tackle sexual harassment and all forms of sexual offending. Huge effort in terms of education, and we're doing media campaigns to raise awareness of the issue, to clearly set out the rules that we have for our network, on the zero tolerance approach that we take to hate crime and to sexual offences. We have staff training underway. It's really significant and important to us that we have really strong support from our stakeholders, and stakeholders are so vital to us, both to amplify messages, to give us insight, and to really help us understand where we should be focusing our efforts and what we should be doing. We really want our approach to be informed by lived experience.
So on that, we do lots of work around days of action, community engagement, really trying to find opportunities to keep re-emphasising those messages. As I said, we prioritise investigations, we are putting measures in place to improve confidence reporting, we are putting staff training in place, and we are focused on proactive policing. And then we also, alongside you, obviously do all the work where we're trying to lobby for change within national legislation. For example, making sexual harassment sexual harassment a specific crime in public places, or actually make sexually motivated offences a recognisable aggravating factor in the same way that we see racially aggravated offences considered by the police and the court service. Maybe I'll just actually, I'm going to pause there. So we have a really strong commitment. As you'll know, we are TfL. We are currently constrained by funding. We are TfL, which means that making change happen in our organisation is somewhat, it takes time. It's a big scale organisation. We have 27,000 staff. We operate a number of modes. So change takes time. That doesn't mean the commitment's not there. So we do really welcome the challenge that you give us on the progress we are making, the speed and the scope and the ambition of our delivery. And I will pause there so there's an opportunity for questions.
Sure, absolutely fascinating, and thanks. I mean, your knowledge is phenomenal. I know you have a great experience in this field, and you brought some of that today. So thanks for sharing that with us. So I'm sure it's prompted thoughts and questions for board members. So I'll open it up to others to ask questions before I come to a couple that I'd like to put to you. But who would like to start off? Alan. If people can just introduce, I know your names are there, if you just introduce yourself briefly, that'd be great.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm Alan Benson, I'm Deputy Chair at TravelWatch. I'm also a disability activist and campaigner. That's my particular brief. So I think some of my comments and questions might be framed in that light. Firstly, a couple of comments. In your commentary, you mentioned vulnerable people, and I think, as you would recognise, everybody is vulnerable in the wrong circumstance. And vulnerability is not something that somebody has; it's something that we're placed into. Even the biggest, fittest guys are vulnerable when faced with muggers and various violence. The other thing that I was going to comment on is disability hate crime. I think one of the reasons that it's underreported is the victims of it don't recognise it as hate crime. So as a wheelchair user, the abuse that I receive on a bus as I try and get on and off would count as hate crime, but most people just consider that part of their day. So I think there's a communication piece there, not about getting people to recognise that they are victims of hate crime. But I have a couple of questions. You mentioned working with the Net and the BTP. I wondered whether you might have a little extra to say about how you manage that relationship or those relationships. And I also wondered if you could comment on your work with the diversity and inclusion groups within TfL. I think that's led by Marcia Williams. Mm-hmm. And the other very specific thing I would like you to give you an opportunity to comment on. Last year, after the Sarah Everard murder, there were comments that people should be able to approach bus drivers and transport staff to seek help. So I just wondered whether you might comment on that. Thank you.
Alan, Thank you. Should we take some questions all together, or do you want me to do them?
Alan's thrown quite a few at you, hasn't he? So why don't you take those first, and then I'll
yes.
I'll
So Alan, and obviously really so recognise what you say in terms of people with disabilities not knowing that what they experience and the abuse they experience is a form of hate crime. And you'll be aware that we currently have quite a widespread poster campaign talking about what hate crime and standing united against hate crime. And we have done quite a lot of work, and I see my colleague from the stakeholder team is on this call, with a number of stakeholder groups. But I am really do welcome your insight about what more we can do in partnership with other stakeholders to increase that recognition and that sense of outrage that this is not acceptable behaviour, and that people who commit these acts should be held to account for that behaviour, because it's not acceptable on our network, and it's not acceptable in our city. So yeah, I'd really like to hear more from you on what more we could do in that. Your first question was, there was the distraction behind me. So you wanted to know specifically about how we work with the Met and BTP, is that right?
So I wanted to give you just an opportunity to how the relationship between your team and the Met and the BTP works. If you have nothing further to add, then that's fine.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to. So this, it's interesting. So as I described, with the Met, we do have a dedicated command who works alongside us. We are co-located with that command within our buildings, and so we work alongside our Met colleagues who work across the bus network and across surface transport, and with our British Transport Police colleagues who work across the rail and underground network. So we work alongside them on a daily basis. I mean, there's a healthy tension in that relationship, in as much as we are pushing them on performance, we are pushing them on focus, we are investing public money in their activity, and they, as organisations, are both, are being drawn into wider policing questions and policing considerations. So I'd say it's a constructive, but relationship with quite a lot of challenge in it, and significant amount of questioning. And we are very much driven from an agenda that's comes through the Mayor's transport strategy, comes through the scrutiny that comes to us from yourselves, with the Assembly and others, and from the Mayor. And police find that level of intrusion into their decision making something quite challenging. But actually, it's been an extraordinarily successful partnership that we've had with both our big policing agencies in the capital for the last 15 years. So I would say there is definitely there's a constructive challenge and tension in that relationship. You should also next time we'll bring the Met and BTP, and you can see what they have to say about what's it's like to be on the receiving end of our constant challenge and scrutiny and questioning, and their demands on their performance and their delivery and their activity.
Thank you. How about the Sarah Everard comments?
So there's two aspects to this, isn't there? There was a specific comment that was made by a Met officer right after, I believe, so right after it was confirmed that Sarah Everard's murderer was a certain police officer, and there were some slightly confused comments made. But absolutely, I mean, we run a safe, our determination is that we run a safe public transport network. So every bus driver has the facility within their driver's cab to call what's code red, which means it's an emergency call that goes straight into TfL's control room. There are police officers who are part of our Metropolitan Police, Royal Transport Police Command, who are based in that control room. So if anyone has a cause for concern and gets on a bus and is able to say that they feel fearful, then there is ability for the bus driver to be able to radio that message through and be able to seek support from policing partners or from other partners. And we know similarly there's the same level of training and support for all our frontline staff within our stations and across our rail underground network. But you're right, there was a very particular comment that was made by the Met Officer, and I can't quite recall the specific comments, but more broadly, that is it. Now, of course, that, you know, there is a significant turnover of staff. We need to keep that trained and appraised, you know, and there will be examples where our frontline staff don't provide the kind of support and service for our customers that we would expect. And when that happens, then of course we will look into that. We will address the issue. We'll address the issue with the individual and with the wider manager. But if that's brought to our attention, but broadly, yes, every member of public transport staff should provide an empathetic and supportive response to anyone and does have access to police and support. And yeah, and then in terms of the wider, yeah, and of course we work incredibly closely with Marcia's team, and again, their insight and that from our stakeholders team in terms of where we should be focusing and how our messages are landing and how we can improve them is enormously valuable to us.
Super, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for taking us through your speech. That was really interesting. So Susan Stockwell, I'm a board member of London TravelWatch. I do work for a large housing association, so social housing is part of my area of interest. My question is a bit more of a broader one, really. We recognise the cost and environmental impact of car travel, and we support the use of public transport. But listening to all of the kind of those safety concerns that you've mentioned, I just wondered how you go about encouraging new users of public transport to feel safe, so attracting more and more people and trying to take them away from using cars and all of those sorts of things, and saying this is a preferred way of transport, and how they would feel, and how you go about making people feel safe around that.
Yeah, and it is a great challenge, and it's obviously that's a challenge which is one which has been embraced by all my colleagues who run the modes across TfL in terms of encouraging people to get out their cars and adopt more active travel. That's part of the Mayor's ambition, and it's part of our air quality ambition. And so there's a lot that's been done, and you've just seen the bus action plan being published. There's a lot being done to encourage people to use public transport, and both in terms of the design of bus stops and of our stations and making stations feel welcoming, and but specifically in terms of what we do, I mean, you know, we do a lot of media and communications. We do a lot of promotion and publicity about the fact that public transport is safe and all the mechanisms that we have in place that you know, so people understand, you know, why it's safe and the level of investment that we put into policing and reporting. We do some very good in schools for children at year 6 as they're about to go to secondary school. So we have a programme that goes out across all primary schools to educate children about taking their first journeys on public transport with their SIP cards, responsibilities that come with that, but also what's in place to protect them and keep them safe. We also have a number of outreach programmes to support, so to include groups including people with learning difficulties and with other disabilities in terms of, you know, supporting and taking their first steps in terms of use of public transport. So we have quite extensive outreach program to target specific groups. But I really welcome your ideas, because this is a real preoccupation for TfL at the moment, which is how to get more people using public transport to meet our air quality ambitions, to meet our net carbon ambitions. How, you know, we want to really prevent a car-based recovery within the capital. So what more can we do to give people the confidence to choose public transport as their first choice about how they make their journey, or choose walking, cycling and public transport? So really, really welcome your ideas on this as well.
Thank you.
Like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Tiffany Lamb, and I'm a board member of London TravelWatch and also the research manager at the Quality of Life Foundation. And having worked on a report for the GLA and Amy LeMay's group on safety for women and girls in London about 2 years ago, I'm really pleased to see that TfL are taking women's and girls' safety a lot more seriously. And I had two main questions. One is about night tube safety, particularly for women and girls, and also precarious workers in the nighttime economy who might be relying on night tubes and buses to get home from work, rather than people going out for a night out and then taking the tube or bus home. Just what measures are in place to ensure that their safety concerns are also being considered and addressed. And my second question is, it's good to see that training will be delivered to bus drivers on sexual harassment. And I'm wondering what is being done to ensure staff safety as well, given that bus drivers have been victimized by more verbal abuse and sometimes even hate crimes during the pandemic. And part of making bus users feel safe is ensuring that the driver is also safe and protected. So I think safety is important for staff and users, which are jeopardized by staffing cuts. So it would be helpful to hear your thoughts on that.
Right, and I think I've got 1 minute left, so I'll do my best. So specifically, and thank you if you for the support that you've given to the great work that Amy LeMay's been doing on the Night Safety Charter, and clearly we're signatories of that and huge supporters of that. So specifically on Nighttube and the night bus network, and we absolutely recognise that the extensive provision of public transport at night is vital for the economy of the city and vital to be able to provide people safe opportunities to get home. And actually, in terms of reported crime on the night, on our night tube network and our night bus network, the levels of reported crime are incredibly low. We get very, very, very few reports of any incidents happening across our night bus network. I know it might feel very different, particularly in terms of antisocial behaviour, but for crimes that are reported to the police, the numbers are surprisingly low. The most common crime is when people fall asleep on the, and wake up and find that their iPod or their iPhone or whatever's been nicked. And we have done some very specific work on theft and on particular end of route reporting of theft. And so the safety provision at night. Obviously, we do have visible staffing at night. We have CCTV. We have lighting. Frequent services that meet the demands and peaks that we see in customers. And we have uniform operational enforcement officers at night. And we do quite a lot of work to ensure that we reduce the risk of people who are very drunk from using our public transport network until they're sober and safe to do so. And the presence of uniformed staff obviously does mean that we can try to, to reduce the kind of rowdier side of some of the network at night. But you're absolutely right that actually in the middle of the night, sort of 2 o'clock in the morning onwards, it's people travelling to and from work, and it's some of our lowest paid workers in the capital who are using our night network. They all need to be safety and supported, and that does include our own workers as well who are working at night. Now, in terms of the support and safety for our own workers, we are in the process of rolling out quite an extensive provision of body-worn cameras to anyone who's in a frontline role. We know from the research that with Virgin Trains and across a number of train operators, that the wearing of a body-worn camera as a deterrence measure reduces the risk of someone facing abuse or assault or aggression by about 40%. So it's a significant and effective intervention in terms of reducing the risk of violence and abuse. We also have training for staff to be made available in terms of de-escalating situations and avoiding confrontational situations. We have dedicated support in place for anyone who is a victim of violence, aggression in the workplace, in terms of supporting their experience through the court system and ensure that we bring offenders to justice. We put a lot of publicity out and feedback to victims about the work that's done to bring offenders to justice. With more to do in the prevention kind of space in terms of reducing the likelihood of our frontline staff being victimised. And we have in the last 2 years been rolling out a new form of operational officer who hopefully you'll see across the transport network. So they're distinct because they are uniform operational officers and they wear peaked caps. So they are very visible, they stand out compared to other uniform staff. And that's because these are officers with specific powers to prevent antisocial behaviour and the triggers for violence and aggression. So do a lot of proactive work to stop people who are using our network, who are likely to be abusive towards our staff, and they provide a really strong visible presence, and they are a really strong deterrent. So there's quite a lot of investment in what we do further to prevent the risk of violence and aggression happening in the first place. I hope that went some way to answering your question.
Yeah, thanks. That was helpful to hear.
Okay. Siwan, I know you've taken a lot of your time. Have you got a couple of minutes there, or do you need to be dashing? We've got a couple of minutes.
I've got a couple of minutes, but I do. Yeah, I need to leave by 5:02.
Okay, it was only just a quick one, really, around you noticed from our report there's quite a lot of focus on the role of a bystander in reporting and taking action, and it seems to be a concern that many people just don't know what to do, or they have a lack of confidence that anything will be done. It'd be not particularly just for now, but moving forward, I think we'd like to work more closely with you as to how that can be promoted and how the role of the bystander can be improved, because clearly your officers cannot be everywhere at all times, but there are members of the public in most places at all times, and that's where things can be improved. So we'd like to work more closely with you on that.
Yeah, and we really welcome that we have a member about this, but it's something that really gives us cause for concern. And I was hopeful, this is going to sound wrong, so forgive me on this, but actually during the pandemic, the willingness of people to wear a face covering, which is as much about protecting everyone else as it's protecting yourself, and that sort of, there is some of that kind of, wider consideration that we gave to others around us. I was really hopeful that might translate into kind of shift in sort of attitudes and approach as we all return to travel and return to normal life. And actually bystanders and being an active bystander, we were really hoping we'd hook into that sentiment and be part of that channeling. So the great work that you've done in terms of the bystander playbook, we promoted that on our web pages, and we've seen that retweeted and seen that drive quite a lot of traffic to the pages. Our web pages are there. We put a lot of promotional material out about being an active bystander through a number of different kind of podcasts and through different media outlets. So things that people listen to, so through styles, magazines and podcasts, and so we've really tried to focus on bystanders and use kind of not atypical channels, because actually being a good bystander and the video that London TravelWatch is really good. It's really hard to communicate on a poster. So it needs to be something which is active and engaging, which explains how you make that assessment about what the right thing to do is. But you can be an active bystander just by reporting, or you can be an active bystander by intervening and speaking to the victim, and so it's about being able to make that active assessment of the situation and then create that sense that public transport is a place where people are looking out for each other, and as you say, widen that sense of security. I think we have a priority for in our media and marketing campaigns for 22-23 We really want to see some innovative thinking about how we engage with the travelling public to play an active role in being bystanders. I really welcome your support, because there's a way of getting this messaging right, and getting it engaged and getting it to land with people. We need to build on what's done, but I feel that there is much more that we can do, but it's difficult, because everybody's just there, they're just down on their phones, they're just looking, they're not even observing. So, and how do we counter that? And that actually now people see the opportunity of travelling as an opportunity to catch up with the latest, the latest Netflix or whatever. So everybody's so focused on themselves. So how do we do to change that? And it's feels like a bit of it's a bit of a societal shift. But collectively, with your input and wider stakeholders, we're certainly going to give it a really good shot, because it is so important.
Yeah.
The better information we have, the better intervention and information we have, the better we are at delivering interventions.
Okay, well, look, we will certainly support you in that, Siwan, but thanks ever so much for your time. I know you've got to go to another meeting, and we'll carry on with our business, but thanks. We'll be working with you obviously very closely, and I think banging the drum on behalf of personal security for some time to come. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that. And I meant to give you an apology that I didn't do the kind of typical TFL PowerPoint on you, but it's just doing Zoom meant that PowerPoint will work. But if there's any supplementary information that I can provide or anything further that we can do, and I want to share the notes that I use for this, if that would be useful to include in the minutes, then obviously do come back to me, and really keen on developing this partnership and the work that we can do together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Siwan, and thank you, Matt. I know you're there invisibly in the background, but thanks for joining us as well. All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks
very much.
Bye-bye.
Right, why don't we, so I've just running slightly late, but I don't think the last two items will take long. I'm glad we're joined by Shahid. Welcome, Shahid. As you're with us, why don't we do finance first? Because the comms update, we haven't got Richard this time, so it will just be the paper itself. So Shahid, if you just want to point out any highlights of the finance report, which all look to be remarkably straightforward this time, but is there anything you want to draw attention to, please do.
Thank you, Arthur. Like I say, I think we are year to date. We're pretty much on target. Not expect any sort of big surprises. The forecasts have now been updated for the full year. So they include things like any recruitment that we're planning. It includes a micromobility event. So assuming all that happened before the 31st of March, or we can sort of rightfully account for all that, we are left with around about £20,000 still remaining in the reserves, in the campaign and project reserves. I think it's probably unlikely we're going to spend that in the next couple of weeks. So we can, if we assume that will be added to the surplus at the 31st of March, the likely closing position for reserves is going to be £70,000.
Right. Yeah. But that will be carried forward.
Yes.
For clarity for new people on the board. Mm-hmm. So that will carry on into next year.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Anything else you wanted to point out, Shahid?
No, I think the rest of it looks pretty much on target. There's nothing much that's changed since previous months. So unless there's any questions.
Can I just ask one thing? I don't know whether you've had indication of this. It was unusual, I think, last year that we had the whole year's budget paid in advance. Do you have any feel for whether that's happening again in the coming year?
I've not heard anything. So I'd assume so. If that's the way it was treated last year. I've not heard anything to say whether that will or won't be actions in the coming year.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions for Shahid? No, it must be very, very clear then, Shahid. Well, I mean, your report is clear, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Makes it simple for us. So, but anyway, we're just obviously drawing the financial year to a close, so it's good that we're in the position we are in, and well done for you working with Emma to. I know you had to move well to make sure we made best use of the money that we had available, and I think there's been some very good use made in recent months around campaigning and stuff. So thanks for your work on that.
Very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Well, Shahid, I'll let you grab some lunch if you're welcome to stay, of course. We'll move on just briefly to the comms update, which, as I say, was prepared by Richard, who's on leave this week. So.
Can I point out a couple of highlights in Richard's absence? Is that okay? Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when I was reading it through earlier, you know, still, you know, doing really well on media coverage, not just in London, but also kind of regularly getting quoted in the Mail, the Telegraph and the Guardian. That's probably about 50-50 where they're approaching us in a way that they weren't a couple of years ago, but also it's sometimes we're putting out a comment on a particular issue and they're picking it up. So I'm really pleased to see that persisting. And I think in terms of, you know, one of our organisational objectives this year is to increase our use of video. So it was good to see that the 3 little mini bystander behaviour videos we put out for our personal security project on Instagram have clocked up nearly kind of 24,000 views, which is really good for a you know, for a London TravelWatch video. So those were my highlights.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Yes, they've certainly created more engagement with users, undoubtedly, and I think rather Shuren was saying earlier, there's some things that are just best done through video rather than through words. So it's been very, very positive, I think. Any questions for Emma on Richard's report? No. Again, some good progress on that. So let's keep that going into the new year, and hopefully now, if we are going to be moving back into the office, there might be more opportunities to do video work, actually live, sort of front line, whether it be at stations or whatever. Maybe something around ticket offices that we could do something, but that's for you to decide. But it's been a challenge, obviously. We've not been in London very much over the last couple of years, but despite that, I think we've achieved a lot. So well done. Okay, so unless there's any other business, I'm planning to draw the public session to a close. Has anyone got any business they want to raise? No. Okay, well, I'd like to just say thanks to any members of the public who are viewing the meeting. We're going to close this meeting down now, so thanks for your time.